Mr. Jeremy Stalls.
What's up, buddy?
Well, just digesting a little lunch, a delicious lunch.
Yeah, it was delightful to share a meal with you, man.
It was. What's your title here at Oasis?
I'm a counselor. I work in our substance abuse comprehensive outpatient treatment side, and I also do a little bit on the IOP side. I do facilitate groups, wilderness experiential outings, and individual sessions.
Right on. And you're in recovery as well yourself?
Yeah, that's correct.
How long now?
About 4.5 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
You got a year on me.
Yeah.
I'll catch you eventually.
It's not a race.
Yeah, no, I will never catch you, I hope.
Yeah, I hope not.
But that's great, man. What was the and what was like the, I always ask this question, what was like the end of your using, like?
Man, it's hard to say. I used for a long time as a long-term IV heroin user, and I came into recovery previously, so this isn't my first go around, and I think it's been a collection of experiences and multiple catalysts for this last stint. Yeah. And I don't know I don't know, man. That's the funny thing about recovery is analytically it doesn't make a lot of sense. I don't know like what shifted in me, why it shifted when it did, and what exactly was it that made that shift take place. But I just know this last time when I found myself using again, everything meaningful in my life felt a million miles away. I still had money in the bank. I still had actually drugs. And there was this moment where, it's hard to put the genie back in the bottle, so to speak, when you really get into recovery and you cultivate some deep connections and you've nurtured those a little bit and you've gotten a little taste of what that's like, and then to completely separate myself from that. It was traumatic. I mean, it's the only way I can describe it. And it didn't take long before I said, I just can't do this. And I walked away and, went to where I felt safe. The people in recovery, and I asked them to help me.
Yeah. I actually had a kind of similar experience in that I had tried to get sober a few times before I got sober this go around, and I had people that I knew in recovery, and I reached out to them too, this time around. I remember it's actually kind of a funny story. Like, I had gone to dinner with my friend who is what you call your Eskimo in the program, right? The person that brought you in from the cold. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's just an LA thing or not, but my buddy that I had used to drink with, we had dinner, and he was like, yo, I've been sober for like a year, and I was still drinking at the time. I was like, what? Are you serious? That's insane, dude. Good for you. I was like, what I've realized is like, I've tried to get sober a few times, but I'm not an alcoholic. And he was like, oh, good. That's awesome, dude. I'm so glad for you because I would never wish this on anybody, Yeah. But he's like, but it's been an incredible year. And I'm like, yeah, that's crazy. I can hardly believe that, Have any of your, like using buddies gotten clean too?
Man, very few.
Yeah.
Very few. It's interesting. I was actually, I was just in Virginia, which is where I found recovery, Virginia Beach, Norfolk, Hampton Roads area. And there's a friend there who that I used to use with, and he's been in and out of prison for a long time. And he got out of prison, and he was very much of the mindset that, I've made up my mind, like I'm done. And he's back using again, and likely he's going to end up back in prison. And to go back to circle back to like what I said earlier, a lot of this doesn't make sense. I mean, there's no rhyme or reason so why like my heart and my mind opened up to something different, and his never. Yeah. And he's at least up to this point, he's still stuck in that cycle.
Yeah.
So the long answer is no. Not many people that I personally ran with. Most of them are dead or in prison.
Yeah.
Or still in active addiction.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know, and that's where, it's just gratitude. Yeah. I'm not quite sure why or how I made it out.
I know. I have friends of mine that I used to use with that are still out there, and they'll occasionally call me, like blackout, and just like saying some really scary stuff about what's going on in their life. And you just kind of have to be like, because I've realized you cannot make this decision for anybody else. You can't tell them this is what they need to do either. Yeah. You just have to listen and go, I'm really sorry that's happening, man.
And the sad part is it's really hard to convey the magic of this process and the, you know, how transformative it can be, not only in my life, but in everybody's life around me. It's hard. You can't really understand that unless you've walked through it.
Yeah.
You know, so, you know, you want to convey that to people that, like, man, there's another way.
Yeah.
And it's just, you know, people have to go through what they have to go through, man.
Yeah.
That's one of the heavy parts of doing this work.
Yeah.
We were just talking about it during lunch,
Yeah.
you know, dealing with clients that are like firmly in the pre-contemplative stage, and they haven't even gotten to a point where they're ready to entertain the possibility of changing,
right,
or the need for it.
Right.
And it's just heavy, man. It feels sometimes, some days it feels like watching people head towards a cliff, and you know, and it's not to meet them with judgment, you know, it's to walk beside them, but it can get heavy walking beside people that are, and there's a cliff coming up.
Yeah.
And I can only go but so far with you.
Yep.
You know, so.
And what are those stages? Those stages that people go through when they're about to recover, and then when they're in recovery. What are those?
Well, we use those in treatment. There's pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, maintenance, action, and then maintenance.
Okay.
And it's just a predictive spectrum. Like,
right,
you're not going to jump from pre-contemplation to the maintenance stage.
Yeah, that makes no sense.
But it's a very predictable phase where people's ambivalence starts to erode.
Right.
And it's usually based on adversity and going through, you know, painful experiences.
Oh, yeah. Good God.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I was thinking about recently about, you know, because someone asked me why I love to work in recovery so much, you know. They said, is it rewarding? And it's like, oh, yeah, of course it's rewarding. But one of the things that I really like about it is that, you know, I have to show up and be really present for people, you know. And that used to be something that was impossible for me to do. But now, as somebody that's in recovery, that's sort of recovered my ability to hold space and just to be myself and show up and be comfortable in my own skin and almost just reflect what recovery can be to a certain degree. Mm-hmm. But then I have to tailor a creative approach to every individual to a certain degree, right? Like, I have to kind of suss out what sort of person this is and what they're going to respond to, and kind of try to show up in that way for them and meet them at their level to a certain degree, you know? Do you feel like that's an accurate way of describing the interactions that we have with clients? Yeah,
I'd say it's extremely accurate. And one of the things that I love about our approach here, because you're right, it is about the relationship.
Yeah.
I mean, there is some universality in relationship, but every relationship that I have in my life with different people, it's different.
Yeah.
And it's no different with clients, because this is a therapeutic relationship.
Right.
And that's where a lot of the healing happens, in building relationships with clients, because it's not my role. We were just talking about this as well. It was a good conversation we had at lunch too, by the way.
Yeah.
I appreciate you.
Yeah, me too.
It really is about building relationships, because that's where the healing happens.
Yeah.
You know, if clients don't feel close to me, if they don't feel like they can see me as a human, they're not going to feel like I'm seeing them either.
Right.
And, you know, I'm going to connect with people on different levels. It's interesting. I had this client recently who we did a lot of really good work together. We went on a walk one day. It was really nice outside. And we were walking past this ice cream place. And just on a whim, I offered to buy him ice cream, because he didn't have any money in his pocket, of course. And I didn't mind. It's an ice cream cone.
Yeah.
And at the end of our work together, that's what he remembered, that very human gesture of me buying him an ice cream cone and taking a walk with me on a nice day.
Yeah.
He didn't remember anything we talked about. He remembered the ice cream, he remembered the sunshine, and he remembered that he felt close to me and I felt close to him.
Yeah.
And that was healing for him. Yeah. And probably the most therapeutic work we did together was that walk.
Yeah.
So it is a very a human approach that we take, and it needs to look different. I'd say. I mean, like I said, there's some commonality for sure, and then there's some boundaries professionally and ethically. But beyond that, people are so complex as humans. There's so many variables in the overall equation that are different for all of us. It's almost naive to think that we can just come up with one playbook that's going to work for every single person that walks in.
Yeah, one size does not fit all.
No, absolutely not.
No.
So I mean, the way you described it was actually, ideal from my perspective.
Right, just being creative in your approach, you know, and I, you know me, I'm a very. If I can be creative at work, like that's when I shine, you know, it's like, it's coming up with new ways of doing things, But one of the other things I was curious of, and this is a question that I ask a lot of folks, because I'm genuinely interested, like, what did you fall in love with in recovery? Like, what are some of the passions that you discovered in recovery?
Man, that's a question.
Yeah.
It's a good one. So much. The first thing I can identify with, I'll kind of take a chronological approach, is when I went to, I do 12-step recovery. When I first went into a meeting, it was the first time in, I don't know, maybe my life, if not my life, years, that I ever felt like I was seen and heard and safe. I just felt so close to everybody in there, and I felt, for the first time in a very long time, I felt some peace.
Yeah,
and that was what grabbed me. And I was watching people walk around, and I just saw a lot of these guys this past weekend in Virginia Beach. There's this group of guys there. They've all been in recovery for a long time, and just watching them walk through the world, and the look that they had in their eyes, and the way that they navigated personal challenges, and the accomplishments that were happening in their life, and most of all, the relationships that they had with each other and their partners and their kids, and it just looked so good to me, because I felt so alone for so long, man, and just to see that, and I intuitively felt at that time, because I didn't have the experience to confirm it, right? But I intuitively felt that I could show up consistently enough in the same ways that they did if I allowed them to show me, and I could move in that kind of direction. Yeah. And that was the first thing that really grabbed me.
Me too. I totally know that feeling. Looking at the success of the program and seeing it and just being like, man, I want that so bad.
Yeah, I remember thinking, whatever these cats are doing seems to really be working for them, and it's because what they got going on is a lot more appealing than what I have going on.
You know, it's sad. It's like, if you don't arrive at that point where you're like willing and teachable, it's tough to recover.
And also, really, it wasn't until this time, one of my favorite things about recovery is where I struggled for a long time in recovery was, it seems very much an academic exercise. If I just accumulate enough information, then I'll be good. Because a lot of subjects are like that. Mm-hmm. You get to a point where you're saturated with enough information that moving forward, you have what you need. Mm-hmm. But life is much more complex than that. It's like this experiential unfolding. Yeah. And I really, that resonates with me, that like every day is brand new. Yeah. And I have these people in this process in my life that it's relevant. Like I lost my mom last year.
Yeah.
I remember sitting there. There's something I never could have imagined going through without getting high. Yeah. And that's something, as I was sitting there, like holding her hand as she was transitioning, just the gifts that recovery brought to that situation. Her passing was about a year-long process. And, this is a woman, I have to say this is a woman that I took from for like 20 years. I mean, literally, was a nightmare in her life. And recovery was not only a gift in my life, but it was a gift in hers. So much so that, she shared with me as she was passing that entire year leading up, as she was getting her treatments, and she would be tempted to give into despair and fear. I got married in Asheville, and there was a huge community of people in recovery around me, and I got to dance with her at my wedding. And she shared that whenever she was going to give in to despair, she would go back, close her eyes, and think about the day we danced at my wedding, and that would get her through, you know? And the last words that she ever spoke to me on this planet was thank you. She looked at me and said thank you, and I cried, man. I left, and that was the last time I saw her alive, because that night she passed, and I was thinking, man, recovery gave me the tools and taught me how to walk through that situation. And when I was sitting there holding her hand, and I didn't know what to say, and I wanted to run, I was able to be present and be open to that situation and be there and not crumble and not get high. And people ask me, what was that like? And it was sad. It was emotional, but it was also beautiful.
I know.
You know, and my long-winded point is recovery, the thing that I love about it takes even personal tragedy and makes it meaningful. My wife went up there 2 weeks before she passed, and she needed help, changing herself.
Yeah.
My wife showed up for my mom in that way and was so compassionate and caring and tender with her and changing her.
Yeah.
That I fell in love with her all over again. To see her show up for my mom that way, and to see the way she treated her. And that was another benefit that recovery's taught me how to find the proverbial silver lining of the cloud. It's not just, I don't have to just focus on the pain. I can experience the whole spectrum of humanity.
Right. Without needing to run from it.
And that's my favorite thing.
Or enhance
recovery.
it.
Yeah. Because nowadays I'm like, give it all to me, man.
Yeah.
Give me the pain, give me the beauty and everything in between, because it's all enriches my human experience. And that is my favorite thing about being in this process.
Me too. I love that too, man. And there was a time when when I was using, where it was I couldn't see something that was awesome without being this would be better if I was high. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I couldn't listen to my favorite band without being
everything that's awesome or feels good, we want it to last forever.
Yeah.
And everything that doesn't feel good, I want it to
end
stay.
Immediately.
Yeah, and that's not natural.
Yeah.
And to stop resisting those things is it's peaceful, man.
Yeah.
And the last thing, man, is just the life that it affords me. You know, I love to travel.
Yeah. Tell me where you went recently. Or tell these guys where you went recently, because
my most recent trip was to Istanbul, Turkey.
Yeah.
Which has always been an interesting city for me because I'm a history guy.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of, empires that originated, back to Eastern Roman Empire. Anyway, I'm not going to bore you guys with all that. But, the crazy part, the first morning I was there, I went to the Hagia Sophia, which was built in the 6th century. And for a long time, it was the biggest building in the world. It was an Orthodox church in the beginning. It became a mosque. It's still actually a mosque in use. But I went there in the morning. It opened at 9, and I went in there. And because of COVID, I had to go through a tremendous amount of testing just to go. And so there wasn't many tourists. I got there, and I was able to go sit in the middle of this church on the floor, because there's carpet on the floor, because the faithful still kneel there in prayer every day, 5 times. And I was sitting there, and I was just looking up, and it was 2 other people in there. And that's a scenario that'll never happen in normal times.
Yeah.
But I couldn't help. I was thinking, I was like, man, it's crazy. I spent the better part of 20 years in one bedroom, and I wanted to leave so bad. And I just didn't know how, man. I was stuck in that one bedroom. And here I am, sitting in a 1,500-year-old church, it's incredible, man. Some of the things that I've seen, and I go to meetings when I travel too. I went into a meeting in Istanbul, Turkey. No one spoke English, but I felt at home.
Yeah.
This lady realized that I didn't speak Turkish. She spoke English. She sat beside me the whole meeting, whispering in my ear what everyone was sharing. And the most probably one of the most powerful experiences I had there is like everything that was being shared. It was just like being in a meeting right down the street.
Sure.
It was the same experiences, the same struggles, the universality of like this thing that we wrestle with. And it was like worlds apart, different culture, different language. And they're sharing about the same things that I hear when I walk into a meeting here.
Yeah.
It was beautiful, man. It was
I know.
beautiful.
You know what? Interesting to, like, I always think about this is like, what would people that don't struggle with addiction talk about in like a 12-step meeting? Would we end up talking about the same fears? Because I think some of the fears that we have, yes, maybe we are a little bit more twisted in certain ways, but like they're human fears, you know? 'Cause it always kind of boils down to at its core, if you travel in far enough to a fear of being like unlovable, you know, like it's like a fear that like I am not worthy of love. I'm not good somewhere deep inside and everybody else can see it. No one's telling me, you know what I mean? Like deep down inside there, that's like the kernel of my fears. Even if it's like, you know, I'm afraid that someone's going to steal my job from me, or I'm afraid that, you know, my car is going to break down. And then what?
Yeah.
And then what? You know, like, yeah. Deep down, what I'm afraid of is that I'm not lovable, you know, and that I'm not good.
Yeah, and I think it is part of the human condition where I think we, and I say we as people that are in recovery, whatever that looks like to each person, I think in a lot of ways, and, you know, I almost cringe when I say this, but I'm going to say it anyway because I believe it. In a lot of ways, we're lucky.
Yeah.
You know, because, you know, a lot of people are trying to adapt in their own ways. They're looking for that genuine, authentic connection.
Yeah.
And we're lucky in the sense that the place that we looked for healing and catharsis, it brought us to our knees, man.
Yeah.
And without that, I wouldn't have been open to finding these other people that were in the same state. Because, I mean, you know, if you look in, you know, I'm getting into like personal opinion stuff, but you know, when you look around the world, you see a lot of people that are running around just trying to connect, man.
Yeah.
You know, they're trying to, that's why I love what we do here. It's really, a lot of it's based around relationships and connecting and identifying like what's preventing you from feeling close to others and what's preventing you from allowing others to feel close to you, because that's where the work's at.
Right.
That's where all the healing, because we live life and we recover largely in relation to other people.
Yeah.
You know, and if we can't do that, it's going to be problematic.
Yeah.
You know, so we're lucky in the sense that our strategies were so devastating that they break down pretty quickly in a lot of cases and bring us to this place where we reevaluate everything.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I see a lot of people in my life, you know, they have they're developing strategies for a similar problem. It's just their strategies aren't as devastating as mine was.
Right.
So they never reach that point of reevaluation.
Right. They don't have to hit a rock bottom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They live lives of like quiet desperation, like Thoreau said. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, God, that's in a great Pink Floyd song, too.
Yeah.
Hanging on in quiet desperation is the English way, he says. The other, what about tattoos though? Because you clearly fell in love with the art of tattoo, right?
Yeah, I did. I like, I enjoy getting tattooed. I like the aesthetic of it, particularly. I
want to see some of these tattoos.
Japanese.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Who's this guy right here?
This?
Yeah.
Zeus.
That's always what I imagined God looks like. A big beard, you know?
It's funny, when I was traveling, when I was in Thailand, this tattoo of Shakespeare, everybody in Thailand thought it was Benjamin Franklin. Okay. And I had a jersey on. Yeah. And one of them eventually told me everyone thought that I had a lot of money, because they thought I had the guy from the $100 bill tattooed on me. And I was wondering why. Literally everybody was trying to sell me something.
And they were like super nice to you. Dang. Yeah. Yeah, just Benjamin's right here on the bicep.
Yeah. But I like getting tattooed when I travel too. I have one from Bangkok, Thailand. I got one in Spain. I just recently got one in Istanbul.
Really? Which one was the Istanbul tattoo?
This guy, it's a whirling dervish.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, they do these Sufi mystics do a meditative ceremony. Yeah. So I went to one of those and kind of commemorated it with a little
That's
tattoo.
awesome, man.
Yeah.
I've always loved that idea of the whirling dervish, like trying to mirror in their dance the spinning of the universe.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it is interesting that the white gown represents like the shroud of the ego.
Okay.
And the hat is the tombstone.
Okay.
So when they spin, it's all about freeing themselves from self-centeredness and becoming one with the divine. So
Yes.
it was beautiful, and I saw it in the very beginning station, the old beginning station of the Orient Express is in Istanbul, and they've converted it. They do shows in there now.
Wow.
So the main waiting room is where the Dervish show was at.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
awesome, man.
Yeah, it was cool.
That's super cool. Dang. So how long have you been working for Oasis now?
2 years.
Okay.
Well, in a few weeks, it'll be 2 years.
Great.
Yeah.
And and you recently got like a degree from school, right? Like you like studied and got your degree in something, right?
Yeah, I just finished a degree at AB Tech. Yeah.
That's awesome, man. So you got a degree, you're traveling the world, life got a lot bigger than that bedroom. So much bigger.
Yeah.
That's awesome, dude. I can't see, like, this will never get old to me, like hearing people like triumph in the face of this particular, anything really. I'm just an underdog story kind of guy. I love watching someone come up, after like struggling the way that we did. But I wanted to ask you real quick about the wilderness experience stuff. Like, when did that start? How did that come about? Was that something that you came up with and said we should do this, or did someone ask you to do that?
Well, we were doing a variation of it. First of all, when I came to Asheville, I remember I'd come here with like 2 weeks into my journey. This time, I had a friend of mine that had moved here, and I came and I went on a hike with somebody while I was here. And at the top of them, I remember at the top, actually it was Mount Pisgah, and I remember going up there. I was in terrible shape. It almost killed me getting up there.
Yeah.
It's very steep. It's short, but it's steep.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites.
Yeah, and I got up there and I was having this experience that I didn't even understand it at the time, but I felt so free. I felt so safe. I felt so connected, and it was just powerful. I was present. I didn't understand that at the time, but I knew I was having an experience.
Yeah.
So before I got into, shortly after I got into meditation and mindfulness practices, and kind of really understood what it was that was happening to me. But in the beginning, I needed the sheer spectacle of that, of the nature.
Yeah.
To really tap into that. So it was a very tangible. So when people started telling me about meditation and mindfulness, it was a very tangible experience that they could point to and say, look, this is what a variation, at least, of what we're trying to tap into. Sure, it's beautiful up there, but what I've come to understand is like it's more than me being present that brings those various experiences rather than just where I'm at. And I've learned that I can also bring that back into my everyday life.
Yeah.
But I needed that in the beginning. So when I started, I got a job at a couple other programs and was doing some of it. There's a guy that I really respect locally named Matt Nan, and shout out to Pivot Point. And I got exposed to some of the work he does, wilderness experiential work he does early on through working at this extended care program, and kind of how he used it. And so I knew that I wanted to do a variation of that because I saw how impactful it was on me. And I was just there as a staff member participating, and I was like, okay, there's some meat on this bone, so to speak.
Yeah.
And when I got to Oasis, we were doing some outings because, our backyard is Pisgah National Forest. This is one of the most beautiful portions of the country. So
yeah.
We were doing these brief hikes in the afternoon, really short, beautiful. Very therapeutic. But I felt like we were missing an opportunity to do something a little bit more substantial. Yeah. And I took my idea to Vern, and she said, run it.
Yeah.
One thing about it, our staff is really good, and Vern gives us autonomy.
Yeah.
She lets us try things, and the proof is in the pudding, so to speak. I mean, we've come up with a lot of creative interventions, and there's a lot of exciting work being done because, and she, you know, I can go weeks without her saying, what kind of groups are you guys doing? You know, I mean, we all talk about it, but, you know, she encouraged us to be, you know, get creative.
Yeah.
You know that.
Oh, yeah. And that's been really, it's been really cool about working here is if I have an idea, run it by John, run it by Vern, and generally they give me the go ahead. They're like, yeah, if you're going to put in the time to do it, go for it. You know, let's see how it works, you know?
Yeah.
If it's a good idea, you know?
Yeah.
But, what is like a day? I mean, I know this, but I want, you know, for the folks out there to hear this. Like, what does a day of hiking look like for us? We meet up in the morning.
Yeah, we have it. We check in, set intentions of, you know, how do we want to move into the hike, and what do we want to potentially get out of the experience?
Yeah, and the staff members participate in that too. Yeah. I check in and I say, you know, I'll even admit, I'm not feeling that great today, but I'm going to power through it.
Yeah, yeah. No, and we always encourage that here. The guys know, I don't want to hear what you think I want to hear.
Right.
You know, at all. I want to hear where you're at. If you're like, I really don't want to be going on this hike this morning, please tell me that. You know, because that's your way out.
Yeah.
That's where catharsis, and that's how we're going to build our relationship.
Yep.
Because a real authentic human relationship a healthy one doesn't look like me saying what I think you want to hear.
Right.
It's like saying, hey man, some days I'm human and I don't want to go on this hike.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we do that. And then I have a bunch of different spots that we go to for different reasons, and we have spots that I like to do certain groups. There's one spot I really like to go to on the Pigeon River, the Big East Fork. It's beautiful. It's besides this crystal clear rushing river. It's in Shining Rock Wilderness, so there's not a lot of people there. And again, this is just one example. It depends on where we're at. I like to do this exercise. It's based on cognitive diffusion, where we all gather around. You've done it with us many times. And I ask them to find a leaf or something small, and we all identify something we want to symbolically let go of, and we place it into this beautiful rushing river. We got to walk out onto the rocks, and then everybody, you know, holds space for each person. Like, I really want to let go of some of the things you hear is my anger, or you hear some people just say my addiction, or whatever people are carrying that they don't want to carry anymore. Yeah, it gives them, you know, it's symbolic, but it's also a very real letting go, so to speak. And then we hike. I have predetermined destinations on each hike that we go to. We don't go too far, but we'll go anywhere from 2 to, I think the longest one we do is about 5 miles. So there is 1 or 2 that'll push you a little bit. Yeah, you know.
Yeah, what's that 5 mile one? Graveyard Flats or Graveyard Fields? We
do Black Balsam Knob.
Yeah.
Tennant Mountain, Ivester Gap. It's a loop.
Okay, 5 mile.
And I really like. I have these sketchbooks that I hand out. We get to wherever I have the destination I have in mind. I usually like it to be some kind of payoff, so to speak. Right. There needs to be a waterfall or an overlook, something that when the clients get there, they're like, okay, every miserable step was worth it. So I pass these out. I get them to put their names on it, pass them out, and I say, hey, it's just about your personal expression. There's literally no wrong way to do this other than to not do it. Yeah, you can sit down. You can write a single word about how you're feeling. You can write a poem. You can do a little journal entry. You can see something that looks particularly interesting to you or beautiful. You can sketch it. You can write down the date. It was really cool. Last week I saw it first. I've seen a lot of creative things. One of the guys last week carried his around and had everyone that was there sign it. Yeah. I hadn't seen that one before. Yeah. That was really good. So now on their last hike, I return those, and they take it with them. And I've even had clients come back to visit that ended up continuing to hike after and taking the books and ended up filling the books up.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's rad.
Yeah.
I love watching them on those hikes, just watching, you know, people that are like fresh off the street sometimes, you know, like rough, like they're, you know, and when they're like, yeah, I don't feel good today, but I'm going to push through it. And then they get to like you said, the payoff point, the overlook or the waterfall or whatever. And they're sitting there and you watch this like feeling of peace wash over them, this awe of the nature that they're surrounded by, like wash over them. And they're just like, they're like entranced by it, and it's like, yes, it's happening.
Yeah, I mean, every time you can externalize an idea that's largely internal, I mean, it's such a metaphor for life, because recovery is beautiful and all the things that I've previously described in this conversation, but it's also monotonous.
Yeah.
It's also tedium. It's also painful.
Right.
It's also showing up day after day after day, which isn't always easy.
Yeah, step after step up the mountain.
Exactly. It's very rewarding. The terrain changes.
Yep.
Sometimes it's flat. There's no roots or rocks, and it's just smooth going.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's going uphill.
Yeah.
And it's like, what am I even doing this for?
Yeah.
And we check in about that. It's one of the things we talk about, like what stories are coming up for you on the hike, and we check in, and I still do it.
Yeah.
Especially when I go on a long hike, I'm on the way up, and I'm, my heart's pounding. I'm like, why do I put myself through this?
Yeah.
The thing is to show up and keep pushing. And, it's just a really cool thing that can translate into their lives, incorporating that. And we talk a lot about it. And I can't think of one client I've ever had. And we've had some clients that did not like hiking.
Yeah.
But I've never had a client that actually participated in one and came up to me with a straight face and said, "See, I knew I shouldn't have come out here
Right.
today."
Yeah.
Never. They're all like, "I'm glad I did it."
Yeah.
And I mean, most of them far and away love it.
Yeah.
But even the few that aren't, in the morning, they're not the most gung-ho about going. They all say, I'm glad I did this.
Yeah. I know, every time. That's awesome. It's true. And that's how I feel too about a lot of stuff that I don't feel like doing right before I do it, But yeah, man, I'm really glad that we get to do this together, man. This is really awesome, I love being able to come to you and like go, "Hey, I've been thinking about this thing," and then you'll offer me like a little bit of perspective. I really appreciate that when you do that with me.
Yeah, man.
I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, I appreciate what you do for our organization, man. It's refreshing. The clients love you, especially when you come in there on Fridays. They torches and pitchforks almost came out when you weren't there one week. They're like, "We want James. Where's James?" So it was
Awesome.
great. Yeah, it was
Awesome.
great. I said, I'll be sure to let him know.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Well, man, I appreciate you. Thank you, brother.
Yeah, man. Thank you.
Awesome.